Australia. Once a paradise is now a nightmare for many.
Australia still is the lucky country, but it won't stay that way unless the government does something to reassure people that they will have a home, they will have food on the table, and they will be able to raise their family.
With GDP growth barely scraping 1.5%, we're balancing on the edge of recession. Wages have dropped by 2.3%, leaving people to wonder how they'll pay their bills. The COVID-19 fallout saw unemployment soar to a staggering 7.5%, and now the cost of living has shot up by 5.5%, making basic necessities feel like luxury items. Housing prices have skyrocketed by 20% in just 2 years, pushing the dream of homeownership further away for countless Australians. With all these crushing realities, the question looms: can Australia ever rise from this despair, or is it trapped in a downward trend? Let's find out by looking at the luxury real estate industry, where properties are priced like they are made of gold. It's no longer news that the housing situation in Australia has become a pressing issue, especially in major cities like Sydney and Melbourne. Over the past decade, housing prices have skyrocketed, making it incredibly challenging for both buyers and renters. In Sydney, the average house price has reached around 1.2 million Australian dollars, while in Melbourne, it hovers around 950,000. These figures represent significant increases from just a few years ago. For instance, in 2015, the average price in Sydney was about 800,000 Australian dollars. Renting isn't any easier. In Sydney, the average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment can exceed $600 per week, while Melbourne isn't far behind, with averages around $500 per week. These rental prices have also surged over the years, leaving many families struggling to find affordable options. The situation has worsened due to several factors. Population growth in urban areas has led to increased demand for housing, while supply has struggled to keep up. The COVID-19 pandemic also played a role, as many people sought larger living spaces, further driving up prices. Additionally, low interest rates have made borrowing cheaper, encouraging more buyers to enter the market, which only adds to the competition. The impact on everyday Australians is profound. Many young people are now finding it nearly impossible to buy their first home, leading to a generation of renters who may never own property. A recent report indicated that nearly 30% of Australians are spending more than 30% of their income on housing, which is considered a significant financial burden. As housing prices continue to rise, the dream of homeownership feels increasingly out of reach for many. The question remains: how can Australia address this growing crisis and make housing more accessible for everyone? Continuing from the housing crisis, the tax situation in Australia adds another layer of financial problems for residents. Tax rates, particularly in major cities, have increased over the years, impacting the disposable income of many Australians. In cities like Sydney and Melbourne, residents face some of the highest tax rates in the country, which can be a shock for those trying to make ends meet. For instance, the average income tax rate in Australia can range from 19% for incomes over 18,201 Australian dollars to 45% for those earning more than $180,000. Additionally, the goods and services tax, GST, is set at 10%, which affects the cost of everyday goods and services. In cities like Sydney, local council rates can add another layer of tax, with homeowners often paying several $1,000s annually depending on the property value and location. The burden of these taxes has led many to question whether the system is fair. How can someone who is already struggling to pay their rent or mortgage also be expected to shoulder high tax rates? This situation is particularly concerning for low and middle income earners, who often find themselves squeezed from both ends, rising living costs and increasing taxes. Moreover, the government's reliance on these taxes to maintain public services has not always led to better services. Many citizens feel that they are not receiving adequate value for the taxes they pay. Are we getting what we pay for? With the rising cost of living and stagnant wages, many Australians are left wondering how they can sustain their livelihoods. As tax rates continue to climb, the question looms larger: At what point does the tax burden become unbearable for the average citizen? The ongoing struggle with taxes, coupled with high housing costs, paints a concerning picture of the financial landscape in Australia today. Since 2020, the immigration situation in Australia has seen significant changes, largely influenced by the COVID-19 pandemic. Initially, strict border controls were put in place, leading to a sharp decline in immigration. However, as restrictions eased, cities like Sydney and Melbourne experienced a surge in immigration, with many people seeking opportunities and stability in a post-pandemic world. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the country welcomed over 160,000 immigrants in the year following the lifting of major travel restrictions. This influx has contributed to the population growth in urban areas, with cities like Sydney and Melbourne being the most affected. Melbourne has consistently ranked as one of the most multicultural cities in the world, with approximately 40% of its residents born overseas. While immigration can bring diversity and economic benefits, it has also led to challenges for existing residents. With more people vying for housing and jobs, the competition has intensified. In some cases, this has resulted in increased rental prices and a shortage of affordable housing. Can the current infrastructure support such rapid population growth? Many citizens are left wondering if their neighbors can handle the strain of new arrivals. Additionally, the cultural landscape is changing, which can lead to tensions among different communities. Are we prepared to embrace this diversity, or will it lead to further division? The rapid changes in demographics have raised questions about social cohesion and community identity. As Australia moves forward, the immigration situation remains a hot topic. While many welcome the new opportunities that come with a growing population, others are concerned about the implications for their livelihoods and quality of life. How can we balance the benefits of immigration with the needs of current residents? The answers to these questions will shape the future of Australian cities in the years to come. Over the last decade, the economic situation in Australia has been quite dynamic, with various factors influencing the cost of living. The COVID-19 pandemic significantly impacted this landscape, leading to fluctuations in prices across different sectors. Many Australians faced rising costs, particularly in housing, groceries, and utilities, as the economy adapted to the challenges posed by the pandemic. Before COVID-19, Australia had already been experiencing a steady increase in living costs, particularly in major cities. However, the pandemic exacerbated these issues. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the Consumer Price Index, CPI, rose by 3.8% in 2021, the highest increase in over a decade. This surge was driven by supply chain disruptions, increased demand for certain goods, and rising energy prices. Housing was one of the most affected areas. In cities like Sydney, the median house price soared to over $1.3 million, making it the city with the highest cost of living in Australia. Rent prices also climbed, with the average rent for a unit in Sydney reaching around 550 Australian dollars per week. This has left many residents feeling the pinch, as wages have not kept pace with these increases. The total number of people affected by rising living costs is substantial. A survey conducted by the Australian Council of Social Services, ACOSS, revealed that around 3.24 million Australians were living below the poverty line, with many attributing their struggles to the increasing cost of essential goods and services. No doubt, the economic situation in Australia has been challenging, particularly in the wake of COVID-19. With rising costs in housing, food, and utilities, many Australians are feeling the impact. As cities like Sydney continue to lead in living expenses, the question remains: how will the government address these issues to ensure that all Australians can afford a decent standard of living? Australia's public services, particularly in healthcare and education, have faced significant strain over the past year. The healthcare system in Australia operates on a mixed model, combining public and private services. The public system, known as Medicare, provides essential healthcare services to citizens, funded primarily through taxation. However, the pandemic and subsequent lockdowns placed immense pressure on this system, leading to longer wait times and reduced access to services. In 2022, the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare reported that nearly 1 in 5 patients experienced delays in receiving effective surgeries due to overwhelmed hospitals. This has raised concerns about the potential increase in mortality rates, especially for patients with chronic conditions who require timely treatment. The National Health Performance Authority indicated that the average waiting time for elective surgery in major cities like Sydney and Melbourne reached up to 42 days, significantly higher than pre-pandemic levels. The education sector has also been affected. Australia's education system is known for its high standards, but disruptions caused by COVID-19 have led to declines in student outcomes. In 2022, the NAPLAN results showed that Year 9 students' literacy and numeracy scores dropped by 10% compared to previous years. This decline is concerning as it can affect students' future opportunities and overall workforce readiness. The strain on public services is not uniform across the country. Cities like Sydney and Melbourne, despite being major urban centers, have reported significant challenges in both healthcare and education. In Sydney, for instance, the New South Wales Department of Health noted that emergency departments were operating at over 100% capacity during peak times, leading to increased wait times for critical care. Similarly, schools in lower socioeconomic areas, such as parts of Western Sydney, have struggled with resource allocation, resulting in larger class sizes and fewer support services for students. Overall, the strain on Australia's public services over the past year has raised serious concerns for citizens. With declining healthcare access and educational outcomes, many Australians are worried about their well-being and prospects. As the government looks to address these issues, the focus will need to be on ensuring that both healthcare and education systems can meet the needs of the population effectively. Various factors have contributed to the growing sentiment that living in Australia has become increasingly challenging. From soaring living costs to strained public services, many Australians are feeling the pressure. The beauty of the country is undeniable, but when basic needs and quality of life are at stake, it raises serious concerns. Addressing these problems requires a collective effort from government, communities, and individuals alike. By prioritizing solutions and fostering a supportive environment, there is hope for a brighter future where all Australians can thrive and enjoy the life they deserve. Enjoyed this video? Make sure to like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video.